I was thinking that this morning, actually, on a flight back into Bangalore, saying what uh, context should I begin with? And I looked at the blurb for the program. You can hear me, right? Clearly on this? Yeah. So at the end of the description, talks about all the shenanigans that went on in the 1980s described in the book, and we'll talk about that, and mentions it as being something that is still disarmingly relevant today, right? And I realized that some of the more mundane stuff that even I do in the corporate law, when you look at it from the history of various events, right, even from the 70s or the 80s, truly history does repeat itself. And we'll talk a little bit about that today. So, getting straight to the setting the stage, so to speak, for this the novel, and of course the factual things that actually happened. I would want to just read two parts of this. I'll begin with there's what I call, there is of course the name of the project, right, and then there is of course the challenge from the powers that be. And so here's Ramjee writing this. Okay. So Suryan and Vasu launched into an enthusiastic explanation of their research, and he is Ramani. Listened attentively, interjecting with questions and making notes. Ramani could see the passion and dedication in the professor's eyes, the two professors at the Indian Institute of Science, and found himself getting excited at what lay before him. Hours later, as they made their way into the lunchroom, he felt a sense of camaraderie, a rare sense of bonding with the professors. And after the meal, as he walked the professors to the car that would take them to Bangalore, Suryan asked, "So, Ramani, do you plan to implement this project within this existing caustic soda company?" "Not really. Initially, it will be part of the R&D budget," said Ramani. "And when the time comes to apply for a manufacturing license, I plan to incorporate a subsidiary." Oh, God. Oh, good. Sorry. Oh, God also is probably right.
Why not?
Yeah, right. "You must find a nice name for it." Ramani smiled back. "I already have. Metkem Silicon." "Metkem Silicon?" Vasu mused. "Very nice. Says everything." Suryan concurred. Now, and the second one is a few pages later, where actually the very next page, where they say, "A news item innocuous for the public but shocking for Metcam and the Indian Institute of Science announced the government's plan to set up a plant to produce 200 metric tons of silicon metal a year. And to make things insulting to both, the government project to be set up by the Department of Electronics, we'll hear a lot of the DOE, would import technology from a Dow Corning subsidiary in the United States." And so the story begins at the Department of Electronics. Do you want to just take that now forward? So you had a private sector project, if I could call it that, with academic support, and government of India says, "Let's take it on." Not unsurprising in socialist Indira, just at the cusp, right? Just at the cusp of the end of the Indira Gandhi era.
So let me, that's actually nice. There's two things that you picked over there. Actually frame it pretty well. What I'll do is, to begin with, let me thank everyone. Came out in the rain. The number of people over here, that's as many more people than I expected would show up today. So let me just put the story in perspective as to what this is. First of all, this is a work, it's labeled as fiction, but really almost nothing in the book is fiction. It's all based on real events. It starts like this. In 1963, there were two scientists, and they were from the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. They had got a grant of 60 rupees to take a bus to go to Mettur. And in Mettur Dam, my former boss had a caustic soda plant. Now, when you make caustic soda, you release hydrogen in the air and just release it, waste it. They wanted a kilo of hydrogen in a jar. And they reached the plant, and the plant manager there, he didn't like professors. I had no problem was engineers versus scientists. I have no idea what it is. He was giving them a hard time and delayed them, just made them sweat a little bit. It turned out that actually was the hottest day of Mettur in that whole particular year, so nothing was great about it. But that delay led them to meet my boss, R.V. Ramani, who was also interested. So he asked them, of course, we'll give you the hydrogen, no problem. What do you want to do with it? And they said, well, we have this idea that we're going to like make silicon metal in a laboratory. Now, silicon metal, we use silicon metal in India principally to make photovoltaics. Very important for us. It means that now you can electrify villages in distant places without having to draw expensive lines. Many benefits. I shan't go into all that. But he said, that's strange. And I'm interested in doing the same thing. And I've been working towards it. I've got this, I got that. So they started talking. And in the space of one lunch and one day, they embarked on this project, which 17 years later, after working on the technology over and over again, they managed to perfect it to international standards.
That's 1981.
That would be around, well, actually more 79 to
Okay.
81. That would be the place. So when they decided to do this, they obviously, the private sector plant, the one that I worked for, did some market analysis and found that in 10 years, the country would need about 25 tons of silicon metal a year. And so he applied for a license to make 25 tons, got the permission, and everything was up and running. And then that's when I had joined the group in Delhi. I'd gone there to be a lobbyist, and I was 19 years old, just turning 20. And we saw this news item in the paper that said the Department of Electronics is going to put up a plant to make 200 tons of silicon a year. And this came to us as a great shock, saying, then why did we bother for 17 years researching technology, putting it together? The underlying principle also here being that in India, in the history of science and technology development, it's very rare that private sector has actually got together with science in laboratories and made a workable product. It almost never happens. When I was a kid, I tried to find out who else did it. Then I found out that CSIR had made one plow or something like that that cut the soil a little better. That's it, nothing else. And so in this particular condition, we didn't know what else to be done. 200-ton plant, one single buyer, the government, one single manufacturer, mammoth sized. That we don't understand what the hell is going on. And then on top of it, to add insult, they were going to import the technology from the US, which is, why do you need to do that? Aren't we supposed to be self-reliant? That was the mantra back then. Anyway.
I have a quick interjection.
Sure.
Now, on method,
Hmm.
when you were writing this and putting all of this together, this is all entirely from memory?
Entirely.
Absolutely.
Entirely.
So no notes, no materials from those days?
When I started writing it, the story was already almost 4 decades old.
Correct. That's why I'm asking the question.
Right. It's entirely from memory.
Yeah. So there's a question then on how you recall some of it.
Is one simple way in which I recall the whole thing. It is the most important thing that I'll ever have done in my life.
Okay.
Because you know what happens was the controversy, to finish that part, the controversy that built up when we went against the government and we complained saying the Department of Electronics cannot be doing this, and then what the hell, what are you trying to do? The battle became louder and larger, and it started to involve everybody in the scientific community. Every big top name of scientist that you can think of was involved in this controversy. And it finally went up to Rajiv Gandhi, who had to take a decision as to whether to allow the DOE to do it, because that was one big, loud voice, and then our voice saying that this completely should not happen. So as a result of that, as it turns out, the battle took 4 years. It stayed on the front page and on edit page for nearly 2 years out of those 4 years. It was pitched. It was terrible. And I was a very young guy. I aged about 25 years in those 4 years. And I spent my time over there in the thick of this battle. Most impressively, it attracted the attention of foreign intelligence agencies.
Hold on. We're getting ahead of it. One minute. Let me just pull you back a little bit. 1 minute. Now, the other thing that caught my attention, which is relevant for this opening part, one was, of course, this recall from memory. The other one is because you said it is a work of fiction,
right,
that you've drawn on actual lived or actual facts, right? Now, I want to read something again from the book, okay? This is, who's the he? 1 minute. This is, as he tossed the bundle, this is Pandey, right? As he tossed the bundle into the mess of papers on his desk, he spotted the scrappy message slip. It had a pink dog ear definably feminine, not for its pink highlight, but also because it was scented. This is a delicate lily, Pandey thought as he sniffed at it. Reading it brought him back to the reality of the present. Now, this is where it comes. Your mother, the message read, called to remind you about bringing home a half kilo of camel meat. Right? If anyone had rummaged through Pandey's desk, they would have routinely come across such bizarre handwritten messages. The canned meat and the mango pickle, there's one here for that, right? There's a reference here to, the invention of an aunt for Pandey who lived in Mongolia. And that the aunt left a message asking if Pandey could send her a bottle of pickled unripe mango, citing the scarcity of spicy pickled unripe mango in Ulaanbaatar supermarkets. Now, all of this is obviously not puerile pranks or outlandish objects, but euphemisms for confidential documents. And that the reality was that he was committing a crime. Now this is all code, right, for various little secret messages. Now, where does that fact fiction matrix play out over here in this context?
All fact.
All fact.
Those things actually happened. I've seen those messages.
Yeah.
It was just.
And who had the code breaker?
No, there was nothing. It was not. The words themselves didn't have a code.
I know.
Whenever all the messages basically said that somebody wants something, and usually this is done by this woman who used to be working over there in that ambit. Angela. And Brito. That's the name I've given her.
Okay. So now this is where.
Yeah. So she actually was one of the people there, and she had to leave messages for this guy Pandey, whose name is also changed for obvious reasons.
No, why is it so obvious?
I've made references to his sexual orientation and so on. So,
that's true.
And that
he would have lost his job if he was declared to be gay.
Yes,
I know that. I saw
exactly.
that.
So at that point in time, it was not good, and I had to take advantage of that, etc., etc.
So tell me, just in terms of technique again. Sorry, I'm just staying on that for
a
minute. What made you decide where to make this change into, a moniker or something else, name the person something? Because in some places you've obviously referred to the people who were there.
So either people that needed to be masked to be protected, that I did not want
still alive at the time. Some of them are still alive.
I'm sure that all of them are still. I don't know if all of them are still alive. I have no idea.
Okay.
But no matter whether they're alive or dead, I don't think I want to actually name names. But there are a lot of names that I have named. And a lot of people, the CIA spooks and all that, those are the real names. So.
Okay, now continue. Sorry, I've read.
No, this is just your question on what those messages were.
That's right.
So every time Angela had to ask Pandey to prepare the documentation, that then she would then go and give it to my protagonist.
Okay, let's just back up. Why don't you tell the story now a little more? Because there's obviously a link between what happened when Government of India says we'll do this project, 200 whatever, tons or whatever, and then go on and then talk about it.
Right. So the job of a lobbyist in Delhi basically is, to use your example, it's akin to what a lawyer does in a court. You have a client, you take the client's brief, you understand the law, and then you go and make a presentation to the court to make sure that the judgment is passed in favor of your client. In a nutshell, that's what you do. And then you have court craft, and you navigate all the obstacles, and you know where the obstacles are, what you need to do. Then you have an opponent who does the same thing. This is what you do. A lobbyist job in New Delhi during the days of the licensing Raj was exactly that in the government. So you had to have clients, then you took the interests of the clients to the government, you applied for a license, and then your competitor would try to make sure that you didn't get it, and then you had to make sure that you got it, etc., etc. And by and large, it was decided on merits. The people over there who understood, they had the yardsticks by which they did it. Every now and again, something like this would come up, and then you have access to the corridors. And if you have access to the corridor, it means you can go in there and pretty much read any file you wanted, which I did. So as a consequence, I had to make sure that I was able to get confidential information from inside the government to thwart the DOE from putting up the project, because the DOE was trying to thwart us from putting up the project.
But it's not just the DOE, right? So now you have the Department of Electronics. You have that, what is it called? Non-conventional.
They were on our side. Right.
So just explain that.
Right.
So now we're getting more into the story.
So
By the way, just before that, the story starts when Madam Gandhi is still around.
Loosely.
Yeah?
Yeah.
But it picks up when Rajiv Gandhi is Prime Minister.
So
right?
the main protagonist who was against us in this book is,
name him.
All right. Now, I'm not going to name his real name, but still, it's anyway. I can say enough so that you can be able to get it yourself. So his father, that guy's father, during Indira Gandhi's time, was a big foreign policy wonk, right? And he was actually very close to, if you know that he and Indira Gandhi were, shall we say, good friends, to use a euphemism. So this guy, his son, who was in the Department of Electronics, would use that relationship to ride that particular power that he wielded over there. And because nobody could audit that relationship, people just believed that relationship. So this man got away. He was just a joint secretary there, but he got away running the entire department top to bottom. He would pick his boss. He would pick who was going to be the secretary of Department of Electronics. And this is how everything was during that time. So he was the one who wanted to put up this 200-ton plant, and he was the person that we wanted to get into. Siddharth's question is relevant because he had all the power that came to him during the time that Indira Gandhi was alive, and he had access to it, and you call daddy, daddy would call Indira, and everything would get sorted out. When Rajiv Gandhi came to power, obviously that relationship was fractured, and fractured more badly than this guy thought it was fractured. So one of the things that we had to do was to leverage that gap. And what we did was to use the Department of Non-Conventional Energy Sources, who were dead set against this foreign import of plant. So the whole intrigue built up in the whole book.
So now we're getting into the bureaucracy. Now this is interesting. So that's the other. There are several players.
Right.
We will come to the
Sure.
foreign hand in a little while. But so you have the Department of Electronics. Now you have the Department for Non-Conventional Energy Sources. Dayal, Maheshwar Dayal.
Correct.
Right. By the way, I as I mentioned to you before, this Maheshwar Dayal is the brother of Rajeshwar Dayal, the family of 5 actually, right? Many of them, former foreign secretary.
He was a foreign secretary.
Yeah, correct. Representative, Indian permanent representative to the UN, Congo,
right,
and all of that.
Maheshwar Dayal was an atomic physicist.
Atomic physicist in charge of the Department for Non-Conventional Energy Sources. And was that largely, given his background, was that largely focused on non-conventional, as in non-coal, non-idle and thing, but was it?
They had to harvest power from the sun, solar, wind, and the ocean.
Well, oh, I see. Okay.
These are the 3 sources of power that they wanted to harvest from. And as any new department,
clean energy.
Clean energy, but they were underfunded and they had their problems. The only problem was that to make silicon metal, the parent ministry was the Department of Electronics.
Yeah.
And they are the ones who are trying to shut us down. And the DNES had to go to them for any permission. So obviously there was already a fracture.
So just tell us a little bit how that played out. Now, obviously, you're in the middle of it. You're trying to push the project for, the private sector project. And you have this behemoth of government intervening. These 2 departments are lining up on opposite sides, so to speak. What's the power equation? This is just interesting. And this is just after Rajiv has taken power, and I presume it's the time when he's made that bold move to reduce, make India young, dynamic, reduce the power of the political structure that his mother had built, all of that.
So I spent 8 years in Delhi as a lobbyist, 80 to 88. The first 4 years were Indira Gandhi, and the next 4 years were Rajiv Gandhi.
Right.
So by the time I was 4 years into that job, I was already an expert on navigation. So at that point in time, when Indira Gandhi died and Rajiv Gandhi became the prime minister, the difference inside the government was palpable. You could clearly see what had happened. And Rajiv Gandhi brought some new things into it. Like, for example, he told all the bureaucrats that every file should have a one side of one-page summary, executive summary. Now, nobody in the IAS knew what an executive summary was. They did not know how to do that because they sent the entire file. So they had to sit there and draft it, and I've actually helped some joint secretaries draft that one-page thing from within the files. And so this is just an anecdote, but there were things in there that were unique to the changeover that you saw. And Rajiv Gandhi, to answer your question, what Rajiv Gandhi brought to the table at that point in time was a recognition that India needed to open up. How much, how far, I don't think it would have gone as haywire as it has now. But he, at that point in time, wanted to bring in things, and he brought up the concepts that were later used by Gorbachev in Russia called glasnost and perestroika. 2 years prior to that, Rajiv Gandhi actually embraced all of those exactly. And in some private meeting, I remember that there was a Russian ambassador who acknowledged it in a private meeting, who said that, well, our playbook is exactly your prime minister's playbook. And that's how it was. Much of this was never reported. It never came out because there was no official banner for reporting what Rajiv Gandhi had done. But it was the beginning of this whole business of liberalization and the end of an era that sought to license everything. So this guy wanted to open up. But what they did not give up was self-reliance, promotion of Indian technology, education. There was no business of let's open up and everybody come in here and let everyone become a delivery boy for Swiggy. That didn't happen. So at that point in time, the whole thing was get an education, try to work somewhere, get a factory, or go to a polytechnic and try to do some stuff. So that was the order of the day at that point in time. So that was the difference in sentiment as to how it was.
Okay, now I know I'm getting ahead of a little bit because it comes later in the book. But now with Rajiv Gandhi and the Prime Minister's office, just explain a little bit. You have it fascinatingly described. You just talk about the way in which the PMO and the PM himself, and of course, really the officials in the PMO, which I think we must remember is a successor to a very powerful PMO, right? The one that his mother had.
Right.
Much perhaps in some regards similar to what we have today, right? But how did that play out between these other two departments? I mean, there's a hierarchy, right? The PMO, I won't use the word is superior, but in between, it's clearly the Prime Minister's office having a role to play, Department of Energy, Department of Non-Conventional Energy. How is that playing out, that power equation?
Under Indira Gandhi, all of the government that happened on a regular basis was run by whimsy. And the people that were closest to her at that point in time had already got bent and they were interested in all the underhanded stuff.
Right, but that had changed slightly.
Not under Indira Gandhi.
No, I'm talking about subsequently.
After that, everything changed. And then there was structure brought into it. And what happens is that people actually had roles and responsibilities. And once they were given something, delegations started to happen and that people were left
So how
alone.
did you see that happen? Now, specifically with regard to the economy? Because you're there trying to lobby for this over several months, several years actually.
It was everything to do with it because what happened was the Department of Electronics was trying to railroad that project through the way they would have done it under the Indira Gandhi regime, where it's not what you know but who you know. So even within the government, there's all that lobbying that goes on and so on. So he would have railroaded it through at that point in time, except that he came up against a wall because now more people had a share of voice and the word merit was being bandied about. And people actually said, okay, let's hear both sides of the story and so on. I still recall, because this was not the only people that we represented, I was also involved in the project to set up Tamil Nadu Newsprint. That was the biggest paper mill in the country. And at that point, I remember what happened was when the government had to approve it, the amount of time it took for the cabinet was, according to R. Venkatraman, who was then the finance minister, he said that he went in there and then the item number such and such came up on the agenda and he described Indira Gandhi looking at him like this. And then he's saying, Madam, I think we can approve it. He said, okay, and that was it. So the whole project got approved on that basis. It's a whimsical, not a question asked. Others had things to say, nobody was listened to. So you're from Tamil Nadu, what do you think? You're good, done, over. That changed in Rajiv Gandhi's time, where people actually came in there with stuff and he would read summary and he would actually look at the merits. You must remember that Rajiv Gandhi was the first Indian Prime Minister we had who actually had a job before this job. Right?
Well,
who else was there? Nobody had the job. And he had to sit in one seat and call the next guy sir and all that, unknown to India at that point. Where did Moraji Desai have a job? Didn't have that. So
okay. So come on, some more of the anecdotes, by the way. Now, because now you have the man who's unnamed or differently named sitting in the Department of Electronics. The guy who, literally could put his feet up on the table and get stuff done. Right? And several bunch of interesting anecdotes over there, right? Because he comes up against this PMO and the entire shift in attitude. This is about 85, 86?
84 to 88.
I'm talking about the specific when when Rajiv has taken over, and then
Those are the
there's
years.
realization that this is a different regime.
No, it started almost immediately.
Yeah?
Almost immediately after, after the dust settled in Delhi, with the
After the-
mass killings of the Sikhs. Once that dust settled over there and things started to get back to normal, the government kicked in at that point in time and things were back to normal. The bureaucracy was running. But several people that didn't have a voice now had a voice, and just on the basis of merit. There are some incidents that I have shown over there where people could get away with a lot of nonsense just on the basis of Indira Gandhi had a more macro level view of the whole thing, but at the same time, she was unwilling to devolve any power to anybody. So she would get involved in the smallest of things during the time. So, people would get away with a lot of stuff. But so the initial 1 year or 2 years, if you are asking about that,
Yeah.
it was a time when people realized that they just couldn't get away with nonsense, that there was actually a process in place. I have an incident over there where Rajiv Gandhi had asked all, and I'll tell the story, Rajiv Gandhi had asked all the departments to make a presentation about their department. And one of them was the Department of Rural Development. And so they all had to make either whatever the equivalent of PowerPoint presentations back then
that
was.
overhead project.
They had that, exactly, they had those slides. And either that or they made a movie, and the Department of the Rural Department was headed by a guy in the IAS who was very upset at having been given that job because he fancied himself as a bit of a dandy. He liked going to parties. And I once saw him in London. He was buying tweed jackets at Marks and Spencer's and so on. Nothing to do with rural development. And so, he was a nice guy. I mean, I liked him. We had a coffee. We used to talk here and there. It was
Also unnamed?
No, we leave him out of this. So anyway, so the point was, he told his people, see, this prime minister, nobody took Rajiv Gandhi seriously. Nobody ever talked to him. Nobody ever thought that I would amount to anything. And they thought that, Indira Gandhi's son, this some fellow doesn't even want to be prime minister, and he's prime minister, what are we going to do? So they treated him in a very blithe kind of manner. I want to say something over here that when you're a lobbyist, you get to understand some of the underside of everything that's going on, because we got to see what's in the shadows. We got to see what people were not saying outwardly. We would hear all of these stories. And nonetheless, when Rajiv Gandhi came into being, so he said, okay, rural development, this guy left that business of the presentation in the hands of someone, I think some section officer or so on, who then called for tender with 3 people. So that guy asked his cousin to submit a tender with three offers, and then picked the lowest one, and then gave him the job to go and make this presentation. And nobody saw the presentation. This guy was off buying his tweed jackets or whatever he was up to. He came back one day before the presentation. Prime Minister shows up, and then the movie starts to play. First, it was a rural scene with a village well, and then you could hear a Bollywood style song with anklets, and this was all described to me blow for blow. And suddenly you had this row of women with pots on their waists swaying to and fro. And they were clearly Bollywood starlets, and they were all walking towards them, and a song starts to play. 5 minutes into this, Rajiv Gandhi threw a hissy fit. He's saying, what the hell has this got to do with rural development? It was a scene, and he stormed out of there and he went back. And that guy who made that movie, he was standing behind the secretary of the department who was getting yelled at publicly by Rajiv Gandhi, agreeing with Rajiv Gandhi as to why this was. So the first couple of years, we saw a lot of this sort of stuff happening before people understood that, it doesn't matter as long as you got the right people. If you had an uncle here or you knew somebody there, things used to move on, and that stopped. And when it stopped over there, one of the people that found out the hard way that you couldn't just get away with this nonsense was our antagonist in the story, who tried to set up this 200-ton plant. And so we were able to do it in that particular manner. So anyway, go ahead.
No. I'm just moving on a little bit, because now we've gone. There's some more players. Dramatis Personae include many others.
Right.
There's reference to East German, KGB. Now this is all playing out in this change in the Cold War situation in the mid 80s, right? And you have fascinating story about CIA and KGB, and just walk us through that. That's another piece, because it's got overseas interest, right? Because the other project, is one which is Dow and has got American interest, all of that.
Right. So the 80s in Delhi at that point in time, especially when you looked at when it came up to the end of the Cold War during that particular time, there were several things that characterized one's life in Delhi. You never thought about it because you were living the life. If you look back now, you can put labels to it and say things. At that time, it was a daily routine. As far as the Cold War itself was concerned, I point that out in the book actually, the embassies of the United States, the Soviet Union, and China, these three embassies particularly, had overblown embassies, huge compounds, massive amounts of stuff, 2, 3, 4,000 people working over there. There were not that many people applying for visas. And there were so many people. And then if you saw the roofs of these buildings, it was bristling with nothing but electronics up there. All sorts of listening devices, wireless devices. Openly, you could see it. You stop to ask, why do these people have this? What is there in India to spy on? We have nothing to spy on. You can pretty much take a photograph, and we didn't really have any secrets per se at that point. What is the deal with it? The important thing at that point was they were not here to spy on us. Those huge embassies were there to spy on each other. And because Delhi was the only free capital in this part of the world. And remember, that was the time when Afghanistan was getting hot. The Soviets were in Afghanistan. There was all sorts of geopolitics going on. China was just building muscle quietly. Nobody could understand the measure of China, but they were building muscle. We heard about them many, many years later when they suddenly, you could not say India and China in the same sentence because there was no comparison. But that started much, much earlier than that. And so this business of building up our own presence, where we were politically, we were best friends with the Soviet Union. Commercially, we were best friends with America. And to a large extent, we managed to keep this thing in the middle going, this business of non-alignment. They managed to do it. People actually believed it. People in charge believed that they were non-aligned. Of course, you would have some political maneuvering going on here and there. But at that point in time, the kind of espionage that used to happen had some pretty big players, as I found out later on. So in my job in Delhi, I hated being a lobbyist. I didn't want to be a lobbyist. I hated it. It was like thwarting my whole life program. I didn't want to get out of there. So what I did was, because I couldn't leave, I used that time to go and make friends in RAW and CBI and try to find out what the hell was going on. Because at that point in time, it was the time that one day I was contacted by the Soviets. I did write in the beginning of the book, nobody said KGB, nobody said CIA. They wouldn't announce themselves as such. But they was very interested in this particular project because they wanted to know where it went. And that was the whole key to it.
Tell us a little bit about the person that you interacted with at the, what do you call it, the intelligence bureau.
There's a friend of mine. You're talking about my friend, or you're talking about the guy who got caught?
Both.
So I had a friend over there. I used to play tennis with him. I had a friend over there. He was in RAW. And he was very punctilious about his job. He wouldn't divulge anything over there. His character I have built in 2 or 3 different places. But he was very interested in finding out what the hell that we were up to. And whenever I needed something, I would go and talk to him. Now, there was one incident when R. Venkatraman, now the reason I knew R. Venkatraman very well was because he was industries minister in the Tamil Nadu government when Seshasai paper and Mettur chemicals were all coming up back in the day. So he knew my bosses, and they were very good friends. And I used to go along, my job was to carry somebody's briefcase. So I used to go along for these meetings.
By which time he'd already become vice president?
He was, in the early days, he was finance minister, then he was defense minister, then vice president, then president. And during this span of time, I used to have to go and see him because, we needed something done. Somebody was not giving us something, and he would help all the Tamil Nadu government people in the state. So I used to go and ask him, could you do this? Could you do that? If it came as important. But he had this huge, burly Sardar as his guard outside. Now, the guards outside all of these particular places were all ceremonial guys. They didn't really have anything other than just to be standing there looking imposing. And this guy was very imposing. For some reason, he took a great fancy to me. He liked me. I don't know what it was. Maybe because I used to ask him about his son, Real Vastral. I used to ask him about him. And he used to complain and so on. So every time he saw me, he would stomp his foot down hard and give me the entire salute, the spring-loaded salute. And people used to look at this and say, who's this guy? He was looking at me. I was in my early 20s, right? And I used to sit there and then have a chat with him. During all of these things that were going on in relation to another case, the manager, the resident manager of the Banque Nationale de Paris, he was with me at that point in time when I got the salute. So he's gone and told the French embassy people, this guy has got an in with R. Venkatraman. He knows something. Next thing I know is, I knew people in the French embassy because they used to invite me to their parties for no other reason than I spoke French. So I used to make friends, and they called me and say, hey, you want to have lunch? So I said, yeah, let's go to lunch. And they pretty much openly asked me, would you like to work for us? And I said, I have a job. No, I can't leave. No, you don't have to leave your job. Work for us. And it turned out that they were trying to quote. I asked them, I was very excited. I said, you're trying to, I'd recruit. I used to recruit me. They're saying, what kind of word is this? Only used in the movies. We don't have recruits and stuff like that. We just want you to give us information, not even secret, and just give us any information. They said, like what? They said, no, we'll ask you. So I said, no, thanks. When it finished, I said, ask these guys. I said, listen, does the Indian government know that you guys are spooks over here? They said, yeah, we do. You see that guy in that corner? He's watching us. Got in my car after lunch, drove straight to my friend in Raw, who picked up the phone, listened to it, and said, yes, you were at the Oberoi, you were having lunch with these two guys. They shook me up a little bit because, nothing was sacrosanct out there. Everyone knew what everybody was up to. And then I started to find out that everyone knew the identity of exactly who was a spy for what and what they were up to. There was no secrets. It was not like in the movies. It was quite open. So when you talk about the people who were there in the Soviet Union who were trying to help me, and the reason the Soviet Union wanted to help me was because if the Department of Electronics had put up that plant with US technology, all the manufactured product out of that particular plant would need US government approval for exports, which means if Russia wanted to get silicon metal from India, they couldn't because the Soviets wouldn't give them the permission.
The Americans
the Americans wouldn't give them the permission to sell it to the Soviets. And it is on that strength that I managed to get the support of the Soviet Union, and they were feeding me information about all the underhanded methods of the DOE, which then I carried constantly to people in the PMO.
Just complete the story about R. Venkatraman and his fastidious nature.
Fastidious nature. He was a wuss. He wouldn't help anyone. He was like most concerned about what four people would say. That was most on his mind, that nobody should say anything bad about him. So that was if you understood how to navigate that process, then you were fine. But outside of that, he wouldn't overtly help. He would not do any of that nature. Okay. And he was friends with everyone. So even the antagonist and his father, who was great friends with Indira Gandhi, they were all friends of R. Venkatraman. So very often he would play the peacemaker over there and try to do stuff. Did a terrible job at it. Nobody made the peace.
Before we get back to Ramani and the antagonist, I have one thing. Because in the midst of all of this, we've forgotten that there were ministers. And this is what you say about the ministers, right? Ministers in India are seldom welcoming, often disregarding common courtesies in their rush to expedite matters. This can be attributed in part to the challenges faced by ministers in the country. In theory, a minister is meant to be a lawmaker with the bureaucracy responsible for implementing the law, while the minister oversees its faithful execution. The minister was never supposed to scrutinize every file that passed. However, in a climate of paranoia, driven by the minister's desire for greater executive power and the bureaucrats' eagerness to shift politically challenging decisions, ministers have become active heads of their ministries, dictating even the minutest action. How does that play out? Now, because because we've talked about the department, the DOE and the DNES, right? And the respective ministers. Who were they, by the way? Do you remember?
Shivraj Patil was the Minister for Technology.
And the other one? There was one more.
They all came under Shivraj Patil.
Oh, they all came under Shivraj.
All the science ministries came under Shivraj.
But you had, go on. But just tell us a little bit about how the bureaucrats then play this out, right? Because now they're facing the situation of two competing projects. Or, well, I'm putting it very crudely. Right.
Yeah, the schism over here was best told of an example. I don't remember the name of the particular minister, at the time that there was resettlement going on in Delhi after the partition. So at that, the minister in charge of resettlement called the secretary of the department and said, please explain what's my job and what's yours. And that man, how much of this has been built up, but some thread of it is true.
Okay.
And the secretary said, sir, you make the policy and I will implement it. So he's saying, what does this implement mean? He's saying, I'll hand out the plots. And the minister thought about that and said, no, you make the policy, I will hand out the plots. So this is what actually happens even today at this point in time. The public facing, I will give you a grant, I will give you a patronage, it's got nothing to do with policy. So when that is broken, when that relationship is broken and it's a free for all, there are no rules. It's just based on whimsy and who does what at what point in time. So this is the basic crux of the problem. So a minister's job over there would sometimes, bureaucrats would send things up to the minister because, they were scared to take decisions themselves.
Right.
They wouldn't. So that's how it was. It hasn't changed, by the way. It's pretty much the case.
Okay. The other one, sorry, just to continue on that point, was I remember you mentioning to me that, of course, the Tamil Nadu connection is clear, right, with Seshashayi and all of that. There was, and we had the different minister, deputy minister, this, that, and the rest, right? You had good, obviously Tamil speaking, all of that. You must have had good interaction with these fellows, right? And there was some ministers in the central, deputy ministers in the central government. You had some interesting story on that and how you
Where many, which one is this?
this is about the trade talks.
Oh, yeah, very often, these ministries are given to people just because they were political allies and so on. And at the time that this whole business of opening up the economy was coming up, the Americans were pretty vociferous about saying, open up your economies. Now they're going back on their word. But at that point in time, they had two organs of international diplomacy. One was called UNCTAD, United Nations Commerce, Trade and Development. And the other was called GATT. In India, we used to call it GATT. And General Agreements on Trade and Tariffs.
Which became
subsequently, correct. But at that point in time, it was. So there was this one minister, I can't remember the name of this guy, deputy minister. Not which Arunachalam. Yeah, perhaps it was a Balmurugan, one of the two guys over there.
Tamil Nadu minister.
He was a deputy minister, completely uneducated guy.
Commerce.
He was
industry.
Industry. Yeah. And he didn't know what the hell was going on. And his PA told him, see, you ask this guy, he knows something about it. So he called me into his room.
Tamil. We can translate.
I'll translate. So he calls me into his room. So I said, Cholunga sir, enna pannu? So he looks at me and says, in the GATT and solrangle, enna the GATT idu? He's just about to go and chair a meeting of this. It basically means, I'm sure that even those non-Tamil speakers get it. He says, what the hell is this thing called GATT? I don't know what the hell it means. So it was a scenario like this where you had people completely unprepared for the job who had to do things. And, there are many, many, many incidents like this.
Okay. Let's just get back to the project. Okay. So, I think that we've not spoken about the two that, call them key players. You have protagonist and Ramani. You want to, you saw the worst of the man and his father and the connection. But what about your boss? Because we've done a session like this on the book launch, and you had, I think, Mrs. Ramani's daughter who was there. So there's a certain, you held him in high esteem, and he was very good at what he had a real clear objective, obviously. But how did that play out? Because he's also navigating through this labyrinth that is Delhi.
Much of the navigation was left up to me.
Okay.
And I had to sit there and do all the underside of stuff over there. But he would call the shots in terms of how it was. And so the top level planning, how did he plan things with the powers that time at the Institute of Science, with the Department of Non-Conventional Energy Sources. I was not a very important person. I was a very junior guy at that point. So I used to take things up before them or try to ferret out and get information, place it before them pretty much. But soon enough, I became part and parcel of the project. But what I liked about what Ramani did at that point in time was he didn't waver. No matter what was put in front of him, he didn't actually waver. There were all kinds of things that government tried. Among other things, they said, let us do this project. You make silicon metal, we'll buy out your entire production, we'll give you a guarantee. So we said that no government can give a guarantee like this. You're not giving us some sovereign guarantee. There's no such thing. It's not going to work. But he thwarted them at every single move. And what really was impressive was how this whole thing came to resolve. So Rajiv Gandhi's problem was, there was us saying that, look, we can do what we do, showing test reports, showing that we had the ability. There was the Department of Electronics saying that, no, they don't know anything. They're just simply coming up with whatever they do. If you don't do this, India is going to lose in the silicon metal race. There was no race, but that was what was drummed up at that point. So Rajiv Gandhi was genuinely stuck in the middle. He didn't believe them. He wanted to believe us. He wanted to side with Indian technology. He didn't have enough to deal with it. So once we brought him test results from a laboratory in America that said that this is great material, he then said, okay, how long do you need to put up the plant? Let's see what you do with it. And Ramani said, I'll put it up in 9 months, in 1 year. Actually, 1 year, he said. So when you put up a plant to make silicon metal, a new factory, all sorts of things come into it. You need electric cables, you need towers, you need like pylons and stuff, you need insulators, etc. What the DOE did was to make sure that all the suppliers were told not to supply material to these people and delay it. So they wanted the 1 year deadline to pass. So what Ramani did, this is something that blew my mind completely. He just built everything in-house, transformers, towers, everything. He just built the whole thing in-house. And I don't think I've heard of any factory that has actually built their own electricals, built everything. And in that 1 year time that he was given, he built the entire plant in 9 months and produced world-class silicon metal.
Yeah. Sorry, I have actually missed something, which is when you talked about Dayal in the non-conventional energy department, obviously in support, right, and helping you. Now there's a little duo over there, right, Guru Raja and him. Just talk a little bit about that, because obviously they helped in many ways, right, to shore up your argument, call it, right?
Maheshwar Dayal came from stock where he was from an atomic physicist. So he came from that whole Baba regime, etc., etc. His brother, whose book you brought over there. They were all very well-placed people for a long time. So he had the ear of the prime minister. He could go and speak to Rajiv Gandhi when he wanted. We didn't have a person like that. You couldn't rely on Venkatraman because he's a big wuss. He wouldn't say anything to anyone. So
not even to the prime minister.
No, he would advise the prime minister, and only he'd be very safe. Maybe it's a good thing after all. Maybe he didn't play favorites.
Okay, let's get back to that.
Yeah. But Maheshwar Dayal did not like what the DOE was up to.
Yeah.
And he first satisfied himself that we had what it took to do it. And then he went all out to support it. And so he would then talk to the Prime Minister's office. So for Rajiv Gandhi, he had this other voice, which was even better than the DOE voice that he was hearing from. If it not for him, we would not have been able to get as far as we did with the project.
Okay, so now we're coming to the end of this. Because your association with this, 88, right? In 87, 88.
It ended in 88, yeah.
Just walk us through the final stages of your association, and then what happened? How did this pan out eventually? The project I'm talking, sorry. Clear.
So my job at that point in time, as I said, as a lobbyist, one of the strategies that we decided to embark on at that point was that we needed to drum up what then was public support. There was no phrase like public relations back in the day. It didn't exist in India, at least. And so the only thing that I could do was to actually go to the press and get the press to start writing about it.
On that.
Right. So at that point, as far as the press is concerned, they decided to take the stance of what was right for the country. And you have a passage in there that you're looking at?
Go on.
Right. So at that point, all the major newspapers were there in Delhi. They were going to write about us. So what I did was to immediately take information to them. And when they heard that there was this Indian plant, Indian technology, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and they had locally built silicon metal versus these people who were trying to import technology to make a mammoth 200-ton plant. First of all, sentimentally, they were with us at that point. Secondly, the press, they smelt that there was some money-making involved and somebody was going to benefit from this whole thing as to why was the logic in getting a 200-ton plant and importing technology at such a huge cost. To give you a sense of scale, the amount that the Department of Electronics paid Dow Corning for just the drawings, designs and drawings documents exceeded the plant cost of Mettur Chemicals. Just that one. That was the scale of difference in the costs. And they were building this entire white elephant. So the press got wind of that. And then, of course, then I was able to feed them all the stuff that I was getting from the Soviets. And this
and East
stayed.
Germany. Is it
East Germany was non-player because,
non-player?
no, they had, nobody believed their technology. To be fair, even they didn't believe their own technology. They kind of said, yeah, we know.
No, what caught my attention was interesting, right? This is the thing about where you'd say, right? Solly heard his name being called as he was about to return to his office. It was an assistant editor asking him if he could go with him to the desk. What's the issue? Solly asked him. Hey, Solly, don't you say you had something to do with silicon? The editor asked. Silicon, you goofy reprobate, not silicone, right? Which is used to make fake tits.
It is, yes. So, well, the good thing is that the press picked it up, and everyone played it. Yeah,
all the leading press.
Yeah, they were all the biggest names in the press. And at that point in time, there was the South Indian press as well that did a lot with some of the people there. We have in the audience one such person over there who wrote a piece. Is that you? Nupur? Right. Everyone knows who Nupur Basu is, and she has worked for NDTV afterwards. But at that point in time, Nupur, that many years ago, you were one of the people that I was speaking to to write it. And you wrote a piece about this in, where was The Economist, was it? Well, there you have it. So we had really good journalists, really good names who were with us in the project and did it. And so every time that we found out that the Department of Electronics were trying to violate Rajiv Gandhi's directive and so on, the next day all the headlines would be full of exactly what was going on and all these papers. So my job was to first make sure that happened, and then I would go to the press office of the government of India, and they were the ones who send the papers out, Press Information Bureau, make sure that they had enough copies of every paper. Sometimes I would carry the copies and made sure that they send it to every single player in that entire thing out there. And for some odd reason, those days there were no cell phones, there was nothing, no communication. Things worked much better. You actually got things done, right? It's a big logistics like this. And I had this broken down car that I was running around in and getting things done. But it worked. So that's the way it was.
So just in the interest of time, let's wind the story down.
What happened to the plant?
Yeah. And of course, you left in 88.
Yes.
Right? By the way, you never thought of going back and doing more of this? This is an emerging profession, huh? Because lobbying now is
lobbying then and lobbying now are two different things. Now lobbying now is like big bucks over there. At that time, our idea of lobbying was trying to buy each other 1 rupee coffee at the coffee board. We didn't have we were not paid any kind of money or anything like that. We never had any cash per se. And if some of the lobbyists were crooked and they used to make a lot of money bribing people, inventing reasons to bribe people and then sharing the money. But many of us never paid a single bribe in the 8 years that I was there in Delhi. I haven't paid a bribe of a rupee to anybody. But that didn't stop me from getting the work done. It's a misconception that everybody is completely corrupt. But that's not the case.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
so what happened to the plant was, it's there in the book. There was a climactic part where Rajiv Gandhi brings everybody to the table and he finds out what happens.
What's the word? I got it. Pissed off.
Yeah, he was very pissed off.
Right? Go on. Yeah, you should talk a little bit about that to end.
So to end it, when this whole thing was over, Rajiv Gandhi actually instituted a CBI inquiry and a parliamentary affairs inquiry. The parliamentary affairs document is available there publicly. Everybody can see it. Everything I've written in my book is corroborated in that parliamentary affairs committee report. And that's a part of what happened there. Both Ramani and I had to go and talk to the CBI. We had to go and give them information as to what it is.
It's really quite cheesed off, huh? I mean, just read this. Look at all this earth moving equipment. They have bulldozers, they have shovels, They have these bloody round things, road rollers, and these are there are white lines to mark the foundations. Don't they mark the ground just before construction begins? Arun, why do they need earth move if it's only a religious ceremony, right? Or groundbreaking, right? Or whatever it is, right? Are you telling me that they've not begun construction? No. Yeah.
That's because what the DOE was trying to do was to spend so much of the government's money that canceling it would be a big blow.
Ah.
So he was trying to put up the plant, trying to put up stuff, trying to find loopholes in what Rajiv Gandhi had said. The Soviets then sent people to take pictures of what was going on and came and gave it to me, which I gave it to the government, and that's how it worked out. So that was the way that we managed to get what we wanted. When it ended, the last few days after the whole thing was done, I was there in a meeting. Mani Shankar Iyer, Rajiv Gandhi, all of these people were there. So I asked Rajiv Gandhi if he would stop by the plant, and he said he would. And so he was on a campaign. By then, I had left the group. I had gone there, but my boss was nice enough. He called me and said, "Listen, you have to be back because the prime minister is coming."
Right.
So I was not really a part of the company, but I went back in there, and then I told him that we should fly down all the journalists that had written about this project. So they were all flown down, and there were some pretty big names over there. Some names I've mentioned, some I haven't, and they all came down to Mettur, and there was a press conference over there, and the whole thing got sorted out. At the end of that press conference, when Rajiv Gandhi, I had met him, I had to meet him frequently to give him updates on what used to happen. And I was a kid at that point in time, so I was treated accordingly. So when he was going back, he had to go back to the guest house to wear the bulletproof jacket to continue on his campaign. He suddenly stopped and he called me. He says, "Come over here, I want to ask you a question." He says, "What?" He's saying, "I've just been to your plant. Clearly the plant works." He's a science guy, he's an airline pilot, he understands science. He's saying, "Clearly the plant works. You're making silicon metal. Everyone's using it. Those years, all that controversy, why?" And the title of the book is what I told him.
Yeah.
I said, "For no reason at all, sir. It's nothing, no reason." So that was the last thing that I said to him before he got blown up. But so that was the deal. And so it panned out in that manner. What happened to the plant eventually? Just fell by the wayside. The neighboring company took over this plant. They did not know how to run it. They didn't have the scientific nature in them to be able to do it right. So they completely messed up everything. And then they sold the plant for scrap at the end of all this. That's what would happen. And then I learned from Mr. Ramani's daughter, who recently, after the book was launched, she told me that the day that they sold the thing for scrap, Ramani went into his room and didn't emerge for 48 hours. No eat, nothing. He was that depressed by what had happened. But anyway, that's the story.
Great. Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Reddy, you were saying?
I said, "Will you give me a long rope to hang myself?" It so happens that I met Mr. Ramani very briefly
You did? Okay.
just before he retired in May 91. But one of the dramatis personae before all this happened, his name was Siddharth. His name is Siddharth, lives in Bangalore. Now, this crook that you talked about, who was in the Department of Electronics, was then in the PMO's office. And he put up a note to Indira Gandhi to speak about what science policy and development, lifted straight from a document that had been developed at the Science Policy Research Unit at Brighton,
I heard about that.
where Siddharth was a student.
Oh,
So Siddharth was the one who told, do you want me to name the guy?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Do you want me to name the crook?
No. We
You
can,
can.
you can, but
I'm not going to necessarily say it.
Ashok Patsadi. So Siddharth told him, "Look, we're putting this out almost word for word. We should give some attribution." He said, no one will know about it. Soon enough, someone found out about it, and he said, "Siddharth is responsible for this. I had nothing to do with it."
That sounds like him.
So Siddharth was out on a limb, and it so happened that Professor Dhawan, who was then the director of Indian Institute of Science and chairman ISRO, got him a job with ISRO because Siddharth was out. and no one else would hire him because of what happened. The reason that I'm bringing this up is that it had nothing to do with, for no good reason, that I'm not an admirer of Rajiv Gandhi. But his whimsical nature was perhaps worse than that of Mrs. Gandhi because he had no sense of the political. So he was manipulated by other people just as much as anybody else. I'll end with that.
You, this, if I can take a question out of that, probably we examined at the start. Are you talking of Dr. Vijay Siddharth? Oh God, it's an uncle of mine. That's why the name and the association, the ISRO and all that has sounded familiar. Okay. Yes, I know. Yeah. But anyway, so to come back to the point on the work, the style, just maybe a little bit just to draw a point and talk a little bit. You've spoken about it, about the different styles. You saw a little bit of it. Indira Gandhi ministry, the ministries under the two respective prime ministers.
So the advent of Rajiv Gandhi, I mean, it's very hard to be an admirer of Rajiv Gandhi because there was no construct by which one could either admire him or hate him at that point in time, because everything changed radically at that moment. I don't know, I have not met anyone today or then back then who was necessarily an admirer of Rajiv Gandhi's, as I said. But at that point, things were changing in the whole world. Everything was moving out. I don't know if, like, one of the incidents that I mentioned in the book has to do with that big spice scandal involving the Larkins brothers. I don't know if you're familiar with that whole thing, right? And for those who might not know, these are two people. I think one was an Air Vice Marshal, Larkins, and the other was somebody who had an equivalent brother, the equivalent rank in the army or thereabouts. And they were passing secrets. They were caught passing secrets onto the Americans, and defense secrets to the Americans. And so try to find out what are these defense secrets that we had that the Americans could not find out by themselves. I didn't understand it. And then it transpired, as I learned, and this is something I do mention in the book. Apparently I was not supposed to, but the Americans were after the Indian test pilots report for the then new MiG-21s that the Soviets had sold us. And apparently these MiG-21s had a left tendency, which then that information would come in very useful in whatever scenarios they built up. And so principally, this was why the Larkins brothers were arrested, among 2 or 3 other infractions. But while so, there was another protagonist over there, and a guy by the name of Kumar Narayan, because he was from Fiji or one of those island places. And Kumar Narayan again came in there, and he was the kind of lobbyist that I should have been, would have been rich if I'd done that. But that is the guy that sold defense equipment, etc., etc., etc. And he was again caught photocopying. Now, here's the absurd side of the government at that point in time. This is the government that Rajiv Gandhi inherited, or didn't, whatever. So when the government found out that these photocopies were being distributed to everyone, they sprang into action and banned the use of photocopiers, and said that only ministers and secretaries can have their offices can have photocopiers. So what happened? Big logjam of people needing to have things copied, and the PAs to the ministers and the secretaries became very powerful in government. For lobbyists like me, we had our pick of any document we wanted. So it worked exactly to the opposite. So at that point in time, if you look at these years that Rajiv Gandhi was active, say between 84 and 88, I interacted with him for this. This was a minor project, but it sort of wove in and out the conversations that happened as a result. So how would the conversation happen? For instance, there was a breakfast meeting that he had with R. Venkatraman at one point in time. They were going to discuss this project. He wanted to go and get Venkatraman's advice on what to do with this project. Now, let me explain something else that happened. As I said, this project was made by Mettur Chemicals, right? Mettur Chemicals making caustic soda, for which they needed salt. So to make salt, they own salt pans in Vedaranyam down the coast. Now, the distance between that point in Vedaranyam, which is just open flat land out there, and Point Pedro, which was in the northern part of Sri Lanka, was only about 50 nautical miles. It was very, very close. So if you stand tiptoe, you can actually see it. So this became a landing ground for all the LTTE people at Vedaranyam. Indian Army took over some part of our salt pans, as my boss told me, to train the LTTE people over there. The big training camps were held. Somebody forgot to turn off that tap when the IPKF went into Sri Lanka. And so you were training here, giving them diesel, giving them arms, giving them training, and the IPKF is getting their asses shot in Sri Lanka. These are all the stories that came into it. So the whole geopolitics of that entire time was a mess. So in hindsight, it's very easy to look back and pass judgment on what used to happen. But for us, every day having to listen to conversations like this was difficult. In my particular case, when Rajiv Gandhi went to meet R. Venkatraman, and then they were talking about Vedaranyam, and they were talking about the salt pans, the one question he asked was, Metu, just these guys that make silicon metal that we're going to discuss, and they have this. So do they have an LTT connection over there? And so obviously not. My boss would have thrown a hissy fit if there was anything like it. But apparently Venkatraman said, no, it's completely disconnected except for the salt pans that existed. But this was the lie of the land at that point in time. So unraveling that wholly knotted ball of wool, first of all, unraveling that hard bureaucracy that existed during Indira Gandhi's time, and then trying to open it up during a time when Afghanistan was happening, the beginnings of the Taliban was happening. What is it? Mujahideen, it was called at that point. And all of that was going on at that moment over there. China was not the big player, but everyone was uneasy about their presence. Soviet Union was coming up to a breakup. Everybody knew. About 4 years before it happens, I heard people in Delhi telling me that country is finished. And it seemed like this is rubbish. How can the Soviet Union break up? This is all our life we've been spent reading Sputnik Junior magazine. How can they break up now? So this was the way it was. So under the conditions that Rajiv Gandhi had actually gone into it, it's a wonder that he made it past those 4 years. From a standpoint of today's management techniques, nobody would want to inherit something like that. So what was his capability? He wasn't training for the job. He didn't want to be in politics. So yes, all of those things happened. Manipulation. By the time in the 4th year of his reign, I think he lost everything. He didn't know which way was up. He just had to, he came in there with great ideas. We should be honest. We should be this, that, and the other. India set him straight.
So thanks for that flashback to 40 years. I'm surprised that we're both still standing on our feet here and talking. Why this long gestation period before you could actually sit down and write the book? Were there reasons of Official Secrets Acts, or what was playing on your mind, or you needed this distancing?
No, it was much more of a practical reason. I had to earn money. I had to run my media business, and I never ever had the time to do it. The company I set up called Explosity started to do very well, and we were expanding all over the world. So there was no point in time when I had the mind space to be able to sit down and write it. When I did, I wrote it in, I don't know, my editor is right here, Karthik Venkatesh from Penguin. 3 months or 4 months, P. The whole entire thing was about 4 months. Yeah, that's it. So that was what really happened. But the story was there in my head all the time. No notes, no nothing. I just wrote it from memory. So that was it.
One more. Yeah. Yes.
When we read book American spy thrillers, novelists like Robert Ludlum and stuff, lobbying and the international lobby activity would involve violence, guns, and women, and that would be utilized to exploit and to secure. Now, whereas when you talked in the last 90 minutes, it's been very clinical and very precise and simple and very normal. So have you experienced such things also in your career?
Can I read something out? Right. This is.
No, let me just tell him.
Okay, very
Let me just tell him that there was no guns and violence.
So thank you. So they are partly answered. So let me read this out. Angela at first felt a little anger, but quickly cooled down. She had brought a copy with her, but decided churlishly that she was not giving it to him that night. She knew that if she did, he would drop everything and start to read it. and what he read would leave him in a terrible mood. She turned, smiled vainly at Solly and said, he's what? Sorry, he's filling it tomorrow. Buy me lunch tomorrow and I'll bring a copy. There's my baby, said Solly, and nuzzled her ear and began to fondle her again. Why the hell, she said to herself, so I want something from him too. Don't stop, Tiger, she encouraged him. She threw a leg over him and started off what turned out to be a very long night.
So yes, no guns and violence. By and large, if you speak to real world spies, which I was in a position to actually do, much of their work is just nothing but dry, boring clinical fact gathering. About 90%, 95% of it. So for me, I was in my young 20s. I was being contacted by all these foreign intelligence agencies and so on. Any man in his young 20s given the chance to play James Bond is very rare, and I'm very happy, very pleased with the
Can I
result.
just also, by the way, I was mentioning at the start, the thought occurred to me that this is happening just a little while after the death of Frederick Forsyth. There was a very interesting write-up about his life, which is titled about how he was one of those masters of, bringing fact, to inform his fiction. And this little article, Telegraph, if I'm not mistaken, ends like this. Sorry, just read it to you. I think it's, take it as a compliment. In essence, the imperfections, quote unquote, quote, in Forsyth's novels are perfected by the imperfections of our lived reality. And if there is any lesson to be learned from the width of the master's bibliography, it is that of spontaneity, motion, and enjoying the journey without worrying about its destiny. It's about Frederick Forsyth.
Sometimes,
to you?
sometimes we have no choice. You enjoy the journey. That's about it.
Yes, sir. While the mic is going over there was one thought this book on Rajeshwar Dayal. Just give me a minute, sir, if you don't mind. This book on Rajeshwar Dayal follows after a large number of books that I picked up, reading about the events which follow soon after, the whole liberalization, fascinating stories of 1991, the Chandrasekhar era, the rest. And Montek Singh Ahluwalia has a little anecdote. I actually tried to look for some anecdotes about this in Manishankar Iyer's book, but I have not found it. I have not looked very hard.
No, he was not involved in this.
Not at all. No, but there is, of course, you meet him somewhere. Yeah, anyway, but on the one that Montek Singh Ahluwalia says, he says, sitting outside Chandrasekhar, no, it was maybe Chandrasekhar or Vice thing as B.G. Deshmukh as what is it called, cabinet secretary, and he apparently turns to Montek Singh Ahluwalia and says, in where we are in the bureaucracy, says, कब तो बदलते हैं, चमचे तो नहीं बदलते. Yes, sir.
It's true.
No, I just wanted to ask a question. Since you were in Delhi, you were in Delhi at a time when it was actually quite fascinating because the entire government was actually invaded by an industrialist from Gujarat. Mr. Dhirubhai Ambani knew everything of what was going on in every ministry. Did you find out how exactly he got that range of information and how was it collated? Because all that I know are of people that he reached out, who they were contacted, but the reach was amazing. So I just wanted you to give us a flavor of Delhi in the 80s, and where did Dhirubhai's people have that much influence?
Very, very closely. My opposite number in what was then Reliance Industries coming up was a gentleman named Reliance Balu. He was the man in charge of getting their permissions, just as I was he was much older than I am. I was the youngest guy over there in this profession. I was in my early 20s, everyone was at least 40. So that was the kind of difference. So everyone liked me. I was no threat to anybody. So Reliance Balu, for example, there was a culture that came up as a result of the Ambanis, that how they came into Delhi. They made a lot of headway with people like Dhawan. What is his first name? R.K. Dhawan, yeah. So R.K. and the other gentleman, not Fatehdar, Yashpal Sharma. Yeah, Yashpal Sharma. So he made a lot of inroads into them because Yashpal Sharma and R.K. Dhawan, they were people in charge of handling Indira Gandhi's money. And they had a lot of very interesting ways. They are the first people to go and park all the excess funds in the village panchayats, 2,000, 3,000 panchayats, which then, once they had the money, that led to bonded labor and money lending and so on. So all sorts of ripple effect. And money back on call when he needed it was outside the realm of anyone. There's a lot of fascinating things that were going on. Dhirubhai Ambani's entire move towards Delhi at that point also was riding on the back of the more legitimate part of a big push on the part of the Gujarat government, which, by the way, I must say was not led by politicians. It was led by the bureaucracy. It was led by the IAS, who did a phenomenal job of promoting industries in Gujarat. It started entirely with the bureaucracy. As far as I know, because I met them all the time, one of my former colleagues actually became their representative in Delhi. He was the lobbyist for the entire group. So I was watching, fascinated with what was going on. And they used to come over to our office all the time, and everybody was friends. Phenomenally great IAS officers who were given the mandate by the politicians of the time. I don't know who was involved. I don't think Mr. Modi was. It was earlier to his time, that they were given the mandate to build Gujarat's industry. That was it. So Dhirubhai Ambani coming, riding on the back of that was the
all Congress government.
pretty much, yeah. It actually
Solanki. There was a guy
didn't.
called Solanki.
But my point is, it didn't matter. But the point is, it didn't matter because it was entirely driven by the bureaucracy, and it was done by in very legitimate ways. So they had Gujarat Industries, Gujarat this, Gujarat that. It just was a big. He was. Sure. And there was this gentleman, Stanley something, I can't remember his name. He was one of the biggest live wires out there. A fascinating man. And these are all very well educated, very well read people, and they were very driven by what it is that they were doing. And if every state had those kinds of people in charge, it just lines up in that manner, I guess. But in that whole wave of Gujarat getting what wanted, I think that Mr. Ambani was very clever in the way he went about it, except that he chose the dark side. He chose the dark highway to get to where he wanted to go. But all doors were open for people over there. But there are many very unsavory conversations and moves that Rajiv Gandhi did not like him. He thwarted every attempt by his part to try and stop him from. He didn't stop him from building his business, but he did stop him from attempting to bribe himself and so on and so forth. So
we should say thank you to Ramjee. I think we've had a wonderful walk through the 80s. And thank you to each one of you braving the inclement weather to be here. And thank you.